Hello, good afternoon. I'm Andy Mutziger with the Air District here in San Luis Obispo, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me get the slideshow showing in full mode. Okay. Thank you for joining us today. Got a couple of housekeeping points here for our presentation today. What we'd like to do is just make sure that folks don't put us on pause, because sometimes when that happens, we get background music that overrides the discussions. So that's one point. The next thing we'd like to do is here in San Luis Obispo, we're going to go ahead and go around the table and introduce ourselves. Again, I'm Andy Mutziger. I am the Supervising Air Quality Specialist for the Planning, Outreach, and Grants Division.
I'm Jackie Mansour, Air Quality Specialist for San Luis Obispo. Melissa Geis, San Luis Obispo Apcd and the Central Coast Clean Cities Coalition.
And I'm Iva John. I'm a consultant to the APCD.
All right, we'd like to go ahead and go around the phones and have folks introduce themselves and the company that they're working for.
This is Eddie Newport from Nel Hydrogen.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear what you said there.
This is Eddie Newport from Nel Hydrogen.
Eddie Newport. Okay, thank you much. We're gonna. Okay, the next person.
This is Rob Delcourt, Hydrogenics.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Got Andrew Martinez and Gerhard Ochtelik from California Air Resources Board.
All right, thanks for joining.
Alex Economou, Santa Barbara County Air Pollution Control District.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for joining.
Joaquin Alarcon with H22.
Thank you for joining. Okay, that may be it. So if others join in, we'll have them introduce themselves when they do join. Okay, so on our agenda here. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. One other housekeeping item. We do want to let folks know that we are recording this so that others that can't join will be able to listen in later. Okay, so on our agenda here, we've already done our introductions. The next step we're going to do, I will be discussing an overview of why we are interested in helping to support a hydrogen fueling station here in San Luis Obispo with our request for proposals. Then we'll open it up to Ira John, and he's going to overview the hydrogen readiness planning efforts that we've had here within the Tri-County region of Santa Barbara, Ventura, and San Luis Obispo. And then we'll bring it back to me, and I'll review some key items from the request for proposals, and we'll identify next steps. And then we'll take questions. So let's just move on. This is not working. Hang on a second. There's still technical difficulties. There we go. Okay, so let's talk about the why. And the first thing we want to talk about is the local market here in San Luis Obispo. In 2017, we were working with Caltrans on an electric charging station, and they identified to me that they were interested in also bringing in some hydrogen fleet vehicles, and they were trying to figure out hydrogen fueling station options. And with that, we began working with them, and we kicked off a group between us, the Air District, the Central Coast Clean Cities Coalition, and Caltrans to to discuss options and to reach out to potential stakeholders who also might be interested in identifying fleet vehicles for our hydrogen fleet vehicles. So with that, in the midst of that, we were also discussing possibilities of a station with a private funder of hydrogen stations. In May of 2017, we pulled together a large stakeholder group meeting. The CEC, the California Energy Commission's hydrogen unit, was on the line. We had Cal Poly State University, the City of San Luis Obispo, the air districts. We had the County of San Luis Obispo, PG&E, and some other folks that were interested, such as transit and school districts. After that meeting, we had more discussions between the group to try to figure out opportunities for fleet vehicles and a station actually being developed. Within the group that we had talked to, the ones that seemed to have the most interest in fleet vehicles, hydrogen fleet vehicles, was Caltrans. They had specified 3 to 5 vehicles that they would be interested in putting here in San Luis Obispo. The County of San Luis Obispo also expressed interest in including fleet vehicles into their mix, the hydrogen fleet vehicles. And then the Air District here. The Air District here in San Luis Obispo was also has expressed interest in adding a fleet vehicle, a hydrogen fleet vehicle. We did have limited movement on the station development, though, and because of that, what we decided to do locally here was to earmark $250,000 of our local AB 923 funds to be issued with this request for proposals for a station, and we issued that, or we received board authority to do that in May of 2018. Okay, so now we're still talking about the why, and the why, we're now talking about regional connectivity. The map we have up here on the screen, we're on slide 4. The map we have up here is from the California Fuel Cell Partnership. And what we see is that there's quite a gap between the San Jose or Campbell station and Santa Barbara. So there is about 200, so there's basically, right now there's one route. There's an inland route on Highway 5 that will connect Northern California to Southern California. The stretch between, on the more western side, the Highway 101 side, that stretch between Campbell and San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara Station, is about 276 miles. And that is a pretty long way for fuel cell vehicles to be able to make that stretch. That's long enough to have range anxiety and limit the coastal or Highway 10 route to be a comfortable route as an option. It doesn't really allow for San Luis Obispo to be a destination location for hydrogen vehicles because while you can get there, you really can't do much once you get here except for pass through. So it does limit the opportunities for people to come to San Luis Obispo with their vehicle and do much of anything within, they won't be able to enjoy the coastal weather we have here, the tourist attractions, the wineries. And, so that's an issue. But putting a station here in San Luis Obispo County, that would fix this issue and open up the viability of the 101 route that reduces, and it would reduce the distance that you currently have to take to get from Campbell to Santa Barbara by about 75 miles. So another thing that we want to point out here is that as we've seen with the recent wildfires and flooding impacts on travel in California, redundancy of travel routes is a critical need. And then in terms of station redundancy, a station here in San Luis Obispo would provide a level of redundancy to the station in Santa Barbara. For example, if for some reason the Santa Barbara station were down, they'd still have the opportunity for folks coming from the north to come down to San Luis Obispo from the north to fuel up, and then continue on down to the station in Thousand Oaks. So also, this station in the Central Coast, it's not just an opportunity for north and south travel. It can also provide a link between Highway 101 and Highway 5. So currently, if a station were installed here in San Luis Obispo, in the city of San Luis Obispo, the distance between that and the station at Harris Ranch on Highway 5 to the east, actually northeast of us, is about 110 miles. If that station were instead installed in Paso Robles in the northern part of San Luis Obispo County, then you're talking about an 80-mile trip between San Luis Obispo County, that station, and Harris Ranch. And finally, if we look at the current that fuel cell partnership map that we we're looking at here, you'll notice that doesn't look like there's plans for the Central Valley, so stations in Fresno or Bakersfield. But we really like to point out that there's a tremendous draw of vacationers and weekenders from the valley and from just in general from the east, coming to the coast, looking to get out of the heat. And San Luis Obispo County is a prime destination via Highway 41 or 46, and maybe less routinely on Highway 58 and 166. Now, this was also pointed out in CARB's July 2018 AB8 report. On page 74 of that, they have identified that they anticipate a marked increase in hydrogen vehicle transportation by 2024 in that corridor to the coastal cities, the Central Coast cities. And then they also anticipate seeing a second wave of high market areas such as Fresno and Bakersfield. So our station that we're proposing here provides not only the current additional link between northern and southern California, but it also provides opportunities for better east-west travel as well. All right, so let's go to the next slide. This is slide 5. And we wanted to also point out that the California Fuel Cell Partnership, in their 2017 letter on the priority hydrogen station locations, that's for cities that can help provide redundancy, provide expanded existing markets, and also new seed markets like what we have here in San Luis Obispo. San Luis Obispo was one of the stations on their list. I also want to point out that in the previous CEC GFO, they had identified San Luis Obispo as a priority station, but in terms of the funding, we were one of the last stations that didn't get funded because they did run out of funds. Okay, so let's move on to the funds coming up. So we do know, we're looking right here on slide 6 of the upcoming CEC hydrogen fueling station GFO announcements. And what they have here is a statement that there's about $20.7 million that they're anticipating releasing with the GFO in right now, it's the fourth quarter of 2018. So doesn't look like they may get it out before then, but we just don't know when the GFO is going to be issued. And we'll turn on to the next slide, slide 7, and What we also know is that the Energy Commission has already begun their plans for calendar year 2019-2020 by identifying here in last month in November that they were going to identify another $20 million for hydrogen fueling stations. So, let's see here. So then I want to bring that back to the request for proposals that we're identifying here today. And what are the goals for that request for proposals? The first goal is we wanted to make sure we got our request for proposals out before the CEC's GFO. We're interested in using our local funds, the $250,000 of 923 funds that we have, to create station developer incentive to include San Luis Obispo, a station in San Luis Obispo, within the list of stations that they would propose to the in their CEC application. And then also we want to also provide incentives for private investors to partner with Apcd to install a station here in San Luis Obispo County. With that, I'm going to turn over the reins to Ivor John, and he's going to talk about the Tri-County Hydrogen Readiness Planning that we've done.
Good. So, Andy, can you just move the slides for me?
Sure, I can.
So, as Andy says, my name is Ivor John, and my role here is to provide a brief overview of the Tri-County's hydrogen readiness planning work that we've done. My role is a consultant working for Apcd in this capacity. So the hydrogen readiness plan goes back to work done in 2015-16, and it provides the context for the offering that San Luis Obispo has currently got, and it's a motivating factor for issuing this RFP. So the Tri-Counties, the planning work applied to were Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo. The activities in the planning effort, which was funded by the Energy Commission, included analysis of potential hydrogen stations, the siting, where they might go, and what would be an appropriate initial mix of stations. Some guidance for local agencies on permitting and plan checks for hydrogen, and also awareness training and resource materials provided to the first responders here, and then promotion of hydrogen and fuel cell electric vehicles generally in the Tri-Counties. So the planning effort came up with a set of recommendations. The next one, Andy. And here's a summary of a few of those recommendations to ensure ongoing support and leadership for hydrogen, and we see that with the RFP. There's a commitment to ongoing efforts to encourage hydrogen here, and then to set targets for infrastructure so that we can entice dealers to offer fuel cell electric vehicles locally. So without infrastructure, you don't get the dealerships and you don't get the vehicles, so it's a critical component to a hydrogen transportation network, and then making sure that the regional plans are factored into awards made by the state as the installers like yourselves seek to submit proposals. And then as part of that, our intent is to help you and support you in any way we can with applications in the Tri-Counties and specifically San Luis Obispo here. So other recommendations would promote renewable hydrogen production locally, and also, to keep an active set of resource materials for planning and first responders. So next, Andy. So the plan came up with initial priorities for where stations might be. And the work that was done was supported by the University of California, Irvine, the Advanced Power and Energy program there. They used the street model with us to develop potential areas where the fuel cell electric vehicles would be sought. And these were the areas that we developed in the plan back in 2016. Thousand Oaks now has a station, so we've met that first priority on the top there because of the population and the purchasing behaviors in Ventura. A couple of other priorities in that county. A second station for Santa Barbara is desirable to start attracting dealerships. And then here in San Luis Obispo, another priority was to get a first station on the 101 here. And since 2016, I think it's fair to say, and you heard this from Andy, that the emphasis on a station here in San Luis Obispo now, it has increased since we did this work. We are seeing it called out, by the California Fuel Cell Partnership, by the Air Resources Board in the evaluation report of 2017, as well as other references to priorities going forward. Initially, the market will be secondary to the connector station, but it's pretty clear that the captive market, anyone going up the 101 corridor, would stop to fill here in San Luis Obispo if a station were here. So let's go to the next one, Andy.
Yeah, we're on slide 13.
Slide 13, thanks. So just to give you an indication of where you might find more on stations in the Tri-Counties readiness plan, there's a full Appendix B, which includes a list of all the stations in San Luis Obispo County. We obtained that from the Apcd here as they permit these stations. The plan has a short list of stations that could be more suitable for hydrogen siting, and that's on page 25 of the plan itself. And then also in the plan are the results of the UCI street modeling analysis showing the top 20 locations. So this link here is to the Santa Barbara Apcd website, where you can go directly to find those materials, the readiness plan that was prepared. Next, Andy. So here's a summary. This is page 25 from the plan. You'll see a mix of stations here in the San Luis Obispo County. And when you look at this list, the fact that these show up in the plan doesn't mean that these are the only sites that should be or could be considered. You'll see on the right there's a score. We did a subjective analysis of suitability for a sample of the stations. We didn't do all of the stations in the county. Most were up and down the 101 corridor, but we looked at the stations in terms of space on the forecourt. That was a primary criteria for scoring. Access from, in and out of the gas station itself, proximity to the freeway, and then just general appeal of the neighborhood and the siting of the station, as that is something that our OEMs have identified as a feature that they would wish for. So again, any station in the county could be a candidate, but here are some options that look pretty favorable from the initial planning work that was done. So this map that we have up now is the chart showing where the IRVINE analysis, UC IRVINE, showed where the first 20 stations might be, and that would provide an infrastructure for most of the favored zip codes that they identified where people might be buying the fuel cell electric vehicles. So be aware that this is based on local purchases and not connector stations or destinations or fleets. It's really based on retail customer behavior using hybrids and battery electric vehicle purchase data as a surrogate. So again, it gives you an idea of what's in the plan. And then let's go to the next one, Andy. Summarize.
Slide 16.
Slide 16, thanks. Just finishing up here to reiterate that our region really is still actively promoting hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. The RFP itself shows that commitment. The Community Environmental Council in Santa Barbara and the Central Coast Clean Cities Coalition here in San Luis Obispo, for example, very active, providing resources for hydrogen and fuel cell vehicles. We have routine workshops, public forums, and ride and drive events here. For example, the Earth Day is a big ride and drive in Santa Barbara and also up here San Luis Obispo. Assistance and support from the partnership. We've got a great relationship with Keith and the team there. And then we've got an ombudsman position now to really coordinate resources and efforts on ZEVs in general, including hydrogen vehicles. So my last slide, next one, Andy, is just to let you know that we received some follow-on grant funding from the Energy Commission to do implementation work of the plans, and that includes hydrogen. So I'm currently hired by San Luis Obispo to work on that implementation effort, and what we're doing through that is to start networking with you as the installers, and then identifying favorable sites where we have station owners, operators who are receptive locally that we can share with you to make implementation work more feasible with potential agreements that can then be used, to solicit funding. So with that, I'd just like to acknowledge the support we've had from the Energy Commission, the Fuel Cell Partnership, and the Air Resources Board in getting us to this point. It really has helped, and I think it is going to serve us well as we go forward. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Andy now, and we're going to go into some of the details of the RFP itself.
Okay, thank you, Ira. Appreciate that. And we're on slide number 18, but we'll move right on. That's just the discussion or the entry for the request for proposals. And here we are on slide 19. So I want to review some of the key dates and activities associated with this request for proposals. First off, we did issue the request for proposals on the 20th of November of this year. And we're asking for submission of the application by the 28th of February 2019 by 5 p.m. And what that application entails, if you open up the request for proposals, what we need to receive is Appendix A, which is the application cover sheet, and then we need Appendix B, which is the minimum technical requirements, and Appendix C, which is the completeness checklist. So we need to have those three items completed and submitted to us by 5 p.m. on the 28th of February. 2 weeks later, on the 15th of March, the Air District will email the applicants with completeness notice. If they are complete, we'll let them know that the application is complete. If it is incomplete, we'll let them know what is missing. And then they will have another 2 weeks, the 29th of March 2019 at 5 p.m. to submit the remaining materials that they need to submit to complete their application. At that point, then, on 15th of April 2019, Apcd will announce the applicants who are eligible for grant funding. So the available for grant funding, again, is $250,000. It comes from our local AB 923 collected funds that we have, and now we'll move to the award process. This is slide 20. So here is the pathways that an applicant can submit or can receive funds from the Air District. The application has to meet the minimum qualifications, and those are outlined in those three appendices within the request for proposal. If we've identified that they've met those minimum qualifications, then they are eligible to receive funds. Now there are two possible types of eligible applicants. The first eligible applicant possibility is those that will be submitting applications to the California Energy Commission's upcoming GFO, and then subsequently receive an award from the CEC to install a station in San Luis Obispo. The other option is for an applicant to come in with private funding, private investors, that they'll partner with Apcd to fund an installation of a hydrogen station in San Luis Obispo County. And here's the key, and that is the first eligible applicant that we've identified within our announcement on the 15th of April. The first eligible applicant to demonstrate full project funding will receive the award. All right, we're going to move to the next slide, slide 21. And we wanted to, there's a few clarifications that we want to point out to the request for proposal. First off, if we turn to page 5 of the request for proposals, it talks about a competitive bid requirement. AB 923 does require that infrastructure projects that we would fund, the air districts would fund with our monies, have a competitive bid process. First, I want to talk about the private investor funded stations. And in our request for proposals, we identified that that the applicant could propose some project components to us, and we could fund on that basis. But that is, in fact, not the case. We've done some more discussions with the Air Resources Board, and we've looked a little closer at the AB 923 guidelines that are embedded within the Carl Moyer program. And what is clear is that the competitive bid must be for the whole project, not for project components. So, secondly, when we're looking at the folks that would be, or the applicants that would be also applying for Energy Commission monies, what our air district has identified, which is consistent with what other air districts have done, is that the GFO from the California Energy Commission is a competitive bid process in and of itself. And as a result, that will comply with our requirements for under 923. Okay, so the next clarification we want to point out is on page 17. So the application that we pulled together, we drew really closely from the Energy Commission's application from their previous GFO. And one thing that we didn't pick up on was the fact that that particular GFO requires that applicants come in with site host agreements. And what we want to point out here is that we are not going to be requiring site host agreements with a fuel provider, between the fuel provider and the site host, in order for your application to the Apcd's request for proposals to be deemed complete. And then the last thing we'd like to clarify is on page 6, the eligible project costs. And those eligible project costs come directly from the Carl Moyer guidelines, Chapter 10, the infrastructure section. And there's a link there to it, but I'm going to scroll down to the specifics. So we're on page 22 now of the PowerPoint slide, and this is directly from the Carl Moyer guidelines. And what it says is that there are two different types of eligible costs. There are eligible costs that are just set eligible costs, and then there are eligible costs that are discretionary from the air district. The air district has the discretion to allow them. What we want to point out to you today is that within these two eligible project costs, the air district is going to authorize any of them to be eligible costs under our request for proposals. Okay. So with that, we are going to open it up to questions. Here's my contact information, and we'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Hi, Andy. It's Andrew from CARB. I just had a question. Just wondering, can you maybe talk about why you're not requiring the site host agreement prior to application?
Sure. You know, and I should clarify that a little bit more. So the reason we're not doing that is because we recognize that, you know, we want to have people be able to apply for our RFP before they might be applying for the Energy Commission RFP, and the companies may not yet have submitted or agreements between them and potential site hosts right now, today. So what we'd like to do is allow them to go through the Energy Commission process and, you know, complete what they need to do within the Energy Commission process. And then, but ultimately for our purposes here, you know, if we award the project, that awardee is going to have an agreement between them and the site host.
Right. At least for one, the GFO funding. Yeah. That's
correct. That's for the GFO funding pathway.
Yeah, for the private ones, you would have to see I guess I'm not sure if you had discussed with the Energy Commission, but the reason they have that in there is in the past experience, there's been difficulty sometimes with stations needing to be relocated after awards, and so having that agreement in place helps make sure that the applied for location is the one that actually is awarded. However, the Energy Commission is looking at you know, trying to balance funds distributed across the entire state, whereas I think they probably might have more sensitivity than you would here, since you are, I mean, explicitly having a very targeted solicitation. So.
Correct, and one thing I didn't point out specifically on our clarification for page 17 is that, you know, we do, for the private installers, we're going to have that agreement in place before we award it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also have a sort of I guess a programmatic or a structural question. You're obviously, sure. Since you know it's first to the finish line on funding is the one that gets awarded. You're obviously you know incentivizing you know people getting their projects together really fast, especially the funding for it. Just conceptually, and perhaps it's you know just dream world, but what happens if everybody has their funding lined up in the early application phase before you're even telling them whether or not their application is complete? What happens if everybody's essentially all got their funding right away or right at the beginning?
Yeah, so let's say we have a couple of private investors that are looking to move forward with a station here in San Luis Obispo. I think the way we would handle that is that the application that would be the private funded application that comes in and is deemed complete first would be the one that we would award the funds to.
Okay.
Nice problem to have.
Yeah, that's.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm just thinking of what could happen, if we're dreaming for the moment.
Yeah, and really, it may be. Actually, we may need to think about that because, maybe it's the applicant that comes in and has the station agreement signed first is the one that would get it.
Okay.
I think we need to think about that a little bit here, and maybe we can put out some clarification on that. As we follow up with this call, we will be issuing the notice for where the recording is, and we can follow up in that with an answer to that question.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Sure. So station developers, do you have any specific questions for us? We're happy to take those. We're excited to have the opportunity here to talk with you about this process. we're also happy to take calls after the fact here. If there's questions you'd like to ask us directly, we'd be happy to do that. And we're also happy with the opportunity to create more regional connectivity and local opportunities for hydrogen fuel vehicles here in San Luis Obispo County.
Hey, Andrew, it's Rob here. No questions for me or Hydrogenics at this time, but certainly we'll follow up if there's any questions. And thank you again for the invitation here and the opportunity to participate in this. So it looks like a very exciting opportunity here.
Yeah, I would say that we did get discussions with the Energy Commission. They contacted us after we issued the request for proposals. They were very interested in participating today, but they had some conflicts in terms of the particular timing. So I think we're one of the first medium-sized or rural-ish air districts to come out with something to this effect. So we're excited to see where it goes, and we hope that with this request for proposal issuance, we'll be able to secure a station here locally.
Andy, if there are no applications that go through the CEC's GFO process, how long would these funds be eligible? How long would they stay eligible, if time moves on before a station is identified?
That's a good question. So I think if I understand what you're saying, we get applications in, and the GFO process takes a while for them to identify who's going to get funded. Our 923 funds that we have here are at our discretion. We do not have a expenditure deadline for those 923 funds, so we can hang tight for quite some time before the station's installed. I guess as a follow-up to that, hopefully the CEC process doesn't take terribly long, and or if the private investor is interested, we can get a station here maybe a little bit faster. So that's actually part of why we have it set up to this way. We have an opportunity for private investors to see this and perhaps be able to move faster than the GFO process. So I guess with that, there is some distinctions within the request for proposals for the Energy Commission grant versus the private funding grant. Let me just turn to that page in our request for proposals and point that out. So that's going to be in section 2, RFP elements, subsection E, which talks about station specifics and timing. And within there, if you're applying with the CEC grant, of course, we're going to basically require that they meet all the requirements within the CEC grant. That means that you have to have 180 kilogram per day hydrogen production, or whatever does come out in the GFO. It may be something different than that. So if you come in with private funding, we will consider a lower capacity than the 180 kilograms per day. So that is one of the key differences between the two pathways.
Hi, Andy. It's Andrew one more time. I just wanted to double check. I mean, is this explicitly for only one station project to be awarded? Just wondering because some, most or a lot of developers are looking at wanting to develop networks and sub-networks regionally, and I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that maybe somebody finds a strategic benefit to perhaps splitting the 250 across two stations. And, you could get two stations in this, since the whole Apcd and the county are pretty large. So would that be explicitly ineligible, or would it not matter?
That's a great question. So I guess one thing that we can envision is, let's say we end up having CEC issue their award announcement, and within the award announcement, they've identified 2 locations in San Luis Obispo County where they're looking to install stations, or that they will be funding. And those 2 stations also applied for our funding and were listed as approved for our grant funds. I think in that case, we would be interested in splitting the money between the 2 stations to provide an opportunity for 2 different station developers to secure some of our funding.
Andrew, I really appreciate that question. Ivor John here. What it reminds me of is that we've heard that the Energy Commission might, pursue this or make favorable terms for regional allocations. And I think with the Tri-Counties planning that's being done, we're pretty excited about that, because I think having a proposal to cite 5 or so stations in this region would clearly accomplish a lot of what we were hoping to achieve in the planning effort. So being able to split, the Apcd's 250 to 2 stations in San Luis, and hopefully with San Luis Obispo leadership, we might encourage Ventura and Santa Barbara to follow suit at some point. But the regional proposal idea is very exciting to us, Andrew.
Yeah. Well, thank you both.
Yeah, so with that question that you just asked, I think what we can do is go ahead and within the email that we have the other clarification, we'll go ahead and identify a clarifying statement with regards to your question, Andrew. Okay, so and with regards to that, we will be taking a look closely at the RFP just to see if there's anything that would preclude us from being able to do that. So, okay, so do we have any other questions out there? And if not, we really appreciate everybody taking some time out of your day here to join us as we try to push forward with hydrogen fueling stations here in San Luis Obispo County. Thank you all. We'll close that now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.